mein Name ist Nicole Borrelli und ich arbeite bei Google in einer Developer Programs Engineer für Android. Heute ich erzähle über Android auf der Autobahn, wie man mit UAMP Musik in Autos abspielt. Und dieser Talk ist nur auf Deutsch. Just a little joke. Anyway. So yes, we're going to be talking about the changes that I made to the UAMP sample to support Android Automotive Automotive OS. So the big question is, what is UAMP? So UAMP is the Universal Android Music Player, it's an open source sample showing how to create an app that works across multiple surfaces, as well as how to do the best practices for media playback. I'm going to skip over a lot of the steps that Karsten talked about yesterday for how to generally support automotive and focus on the changes that I made for UAMP, addressing some of the problems I came up with and what I did to solve them. So like he was talking about yesterday, the first thing we have to do is we have to have a media browser service. And since UAMP already has one, I didn't really need to do anything there. What I did need to do is I created an automotive module and I set the feature flag in the manifest. So at this point, we need to support 3 different things. We need to support playback, settings, and login. So we'll just go through a few of each one of these in turn. So for playback, the sort of kickstart that we got from using UAMP is that it's already using ExoPlayer and the MediaSession connector. So this is really helpful. It's pretty simple to use, and it handles a lot of the boilerplate for you. And I got to discover that it was really nice and configurable once I figured out how I wanted to do things. So I say that it reduces boilerplate, but let me show you an example. So if you've made a media browser service, you probably have callbacks like this, where you have onPlay for media ID, and you might just call onPrepare for media ID and then play it. And onPrepare for media ID, you decide, in this case, we just find the one media source and play it. You might create a playlist based on it, that sort of thing. And honestly, if we use the MediaSession connector, it's not all that much less code, because you still have to build the playlist yourself. But then we also have to write these functions with a media browser service, and they get repetitive, and I didn't include like onSkip to next and onSkip to previous, because those can be a bit more intense with getting timelines and figuring that out. The neat thing is that if you're using the MediaSession connector, you just don't have to write them. And that's really helpful. So how do you create a MediaSession connector? Well, first you create a MediaSession. And if you have your own, you might be doing something like this, and you might be thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to go and support Android Automotive now. And when you do this, you might end up with a little bit of a gotcha with the session pending intent. because you might be creating something like this, where you get the launcher intent and create a pending intent for it. The problem is that there is no launcher intent on Android Automotive OS. So you end up getting null pointer exception here. And I just fix it by getting the package, using that, and then using LED, which is really nice, at least in Kotlin. And this works without having to check. You can just, so at the end of this, the session pending intent will be null on Android Automotive OS, but the set session activity accepts null, so everything is cool. Okay. So then we have a media session. And so then we're going to go and we're going to create a media session connector. And that's pretty simple. We set the player to whatever the ExoPlayer is that you had created. We set the playback preparer to the code that we had written previously with the on prepare from media ID and the others. And then we create this queue navigator. The queue navigator is really just in charge of giving a media description compat when given an ExoPlayer instance and an index into its timeline. So it's pretty simple. If you want to look at the code, it's in the GitHub, and I'll show you the link to the code at the end. So the next up is settings. There wasn't really much to support for settings for UAMP because UAMP doesn't have much, but I created the settings activity, and we just add the intent filter there. And the activity itself is just an app compat activity, so you can use all of this traditional widgets and themes and that sort of thing that you would usually do. It's recommended to use dark theme for Automotive OS. And then I just created a preferences fragment to make it really simple. The last one is login. And login was a little bit more tricky for me to figure out. At first, I actually thought about using a custom action, but then I realized I needed to pass in more data, and the user needed to enter something. And when you use custom actions for Automotive OS, it shows an icon in the controls bar, which doesn't really make all that much sense. So I ended up going for creating custom commands. So the other interesting part is that the UAMP itself, for the mobile version, it doesn't support login. Or it doesn't require login. And so what I needed to do first is I had the media browser service, but I needed to extend it. So I created an automotive music service. It just extends the music service from our common class, but then I could add some classes. I could add some methods here. I also added an activity to our manifest so that I could do login. Carson explained yesterday how you trigger a login, which was to set the browser, the playback state to the error state, and then set the error code to error code authentication expired. And then we just add in the extras with the pending intent for going to our login activity. So after we do this, when we start up UAMP, you'll get a screen that looks like this with a login button. Hit the login button, and you go to your login activity. At this point, I started working on the custom commands. And so I just created two really simple commands, login, logout. And I registered a command receiver for these. So The command receiver is also pretty simple. There's a couple of extra parameters which are not important for this use case. The command is the command string that's getting passed in. The extras are the extras, and then there's the result receiver if you wanted to pass the results back. And login will take advantage of this. So the logout command, the login and logout commands are pretty similar. The login has more of the logic there because logout, you just have to log the user out and then set the error state again. So the login command looks something like this. So we fetch the user's login and password out of the extras. We do our login. If you have to do server authentication, it would probably be helpful. You could probably end up using a coroutine, making this a suspend function, and then calling launch here, which is really helpful because the callback will wait for you. And then if that works out, if the user gets authenticated, we can clear our error message from the error state. We invalidate the player state so that it will publish the playback again, and then send a result. If the user failed to authenticate, we'll just we'll resend all of the error stuff so that Automotive OS will show that login button again. But with everything done, we have our nice browsing screen. So yes, so we've talked about how to create the ExoPlayer, how I use the ExoPlayer MediaSession extension. The settings, very simple preferences activity and login to, I guess, add the support for Automotive OS to UAMP. The code is all up on GitHub with a giant QR code if you wanted to snag that. And that's pretty much all that I had to talk about.